5 super useful mixing tips that you can take into 2025. Rapid fired, no time wasted. Let's get into it. Yo, what's good, guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and stick around because I drop videos like this every day. You don't want to miss them. Anyways, let's get right into it. 5 tips for 2025 to set you ahead of the competition. Before we jump into it, I'll play you what we got pulled up here. It's just a beat with some vocals, a rap song, not mixed. Here it is.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the course. I just drank them playing golf. Teleport.
Whatever, you get the idea. Tip number 1 is to stop over EQing. If your EQ looks like this, you might be over EQing. Now, I always need to do a little disclaimer that what your EQ looks like doesn't inherently matter, but if it always looks like this, it might be an indication that you're over EQing. Like, for example, these are 10, 11, 13 dB cuts. These are big cuts. And my EQ used to look like this. Yours probably does, or at least it used to, but I'm here to show you that you might be over EQing. Ready? So here's what it sounds like with this EQ on the vocal.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40.
Now watch what happens. I'm going to turn it off and bypass it halfway through. And notice how much better it sounds without any EQ at all. Just completely raw.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the course. I just drank them playing golf.
So if you're over EQing, you're stripping the life out of your sources, especially vocals. The human ear is so keen to pick up vocals and we hear every little change. So if you're over EQing, you're not only stripping the life of it, you're making it sound unnatural. And you can see here that all this work you did on your EQ, the 20 minutes you just spent EQing, did more harm than if you just took the EQ off entirely. So yeah, we got to EQ, but if you over EQ, you can really ruin something, so be careful. It's a fine line to walk. Just be careful not to over EQ. I hear it all the time. The next problem that I hear a lot, and these are honestly the 2 biggest mix tips you're going to get, is don't be afraid to compress more. So the first tip was don't EQ quite as much. This is to compress more. Now, obviously, this is a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, I hear people EQing too much and compressing not enough. Like, I hear the rule passed around, just so dumb, compress 3 dBs max, right? You've probably heard it, whether you implement it or not, but you've probably heard it. Ready? So I got a CLA 76 compressor set up here on the vocal that's doing about 3 dBs of gain reduction max, and I'll let you hear that.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the course. I just drank them playing golf. Teleport the way I drive.
You can hear at the louder parts it was tapping that 3 dBs. So that's, if you were to follow that rule, that's 3 dBs of compression max. Ready? But I have set up here, pre-set up, another compressor and a third compressor. So if I engage these 2 other compressors, listen to how much more in your face and forward this vocal sounds because we're compressing it more.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the course. I just.
As opposed to this with 1 compressor.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the course. I just drank them playing golf. Teleport the way.
Right, and you might be thinking, well, it's just way louder. It's actually not. Right here, we got our vocals. Watch the peak with just our 1 compressor doing 3 dBs of gain reduction. Watch where our levels are hitting.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up.
8.3 peak. Now I engage the other 2 compressors. Let's see where we're hitting.
Still not high, but still got lost. 3-shot polos, all the cost. 40s teed up on the coast.
We still got like 1.3 dBs of headroom before we even reach where we were before. So that means I could turn these up even more just to match where we were with that 1 compressor. So not only does it sound way louder, we also got headroom to make it more louder to fit other things. So compression is going to give you space and it's going to make things sound louder and in your face if you set them up properly. Now, don't get me wrong, you can use too much compression. Some people need to use less, right? This is all a case-by-case basis, but from generally what I hear, you can afford to compress more, especially in modern genres. If you really listen, they're super compressed. So don't be afraid to compress a little bit more, whether it's push each compressor harder, use more compressors, right? It all depends on your style, the song, etc. There's no blanket statements that work here, but generally speaking, I hear most amateurs, they can afford to use more compression. And you can see here how much more in your face it sounded. All right, the next tip is don't be afraid of hard clipping. I know people hear hard clipping, and even just in the name hard, they think of hard clipping as creating tons of distortion, and it's really harsh sounding, and that can be the case, but it can actually be more transparent than soft clipping. And I'm not here to say soft clipping is bad. I like both, but people have this fear of hard clipping and they think that it's going to make your sound crunchy and all that. And if you use it right, it doesn't. It just creates some headroom. So here on our master bus, I have a limiter set up. It's not doing any gain pushing or boosting. It's just so that I don't peak in my tutorial here. But if I just play the song with no processing, no hard clipping, anything, let's see where our peaks are hitting.
Still not high, but still got lost. Thrift shop polos, all the cost.
So you can see we got to about negative 1.2 dBs. That was our peaks. Now I have a hard clipper set up before it. So here's my hard clipper first, and then it's going into the limiter on our mix bus. And now watch where our peaks are hitting.
Still not high, but still got lost. Thrift shop polos, all the cost. 40s Tito.
So instead of negative 1.2, we're at negative 3.6. So that's like 2.5 dBs. I don't know. I can't think right now while I'm filming on the spot, but that's a few dBs of headroom that we just created. And did you notice any crazy distortion or ruining the quality of the song? No, I'll let you listen to it again. Here it is before without clipping.
Still not high, but still got lost. Thrift shop polos, all the cost. 40.
And here it is with the hard clipper.
Still not high, but still got lost. Thrift shop polos, all the cost. 40.
Right? It sounds fine, and we're creating so much headroom. That means that we can then turn our song up more and push it more and get it louder. And I'll let you see the hard clipper in action. You can see what it down here, the white is the waveform, and then where it turns red is what it's clipping off.
Still not high, but still got lost. Thrift shop polos, all the cost. 40s Tito bomb.
So you can see it's just getting those super offshoot, loud, transient peaks that we just probably don't really need, right? We still have transients. We're not killing our transients. We're just taming them. And this works in a different way than compression and limiting would. And it works in a way where if you set it up properly, it can actually be pretty transparent. And then you can push your limiter harder or push into a compressor or compress first, right? There's a million ways you can do it. But the point here is don't be afraid of hard clipping. It has a bad connotation, but it's actually the secret sauce. All right, for the last two tips, we're switching to a different project. This here is an instrumental. I produced it, not important. I'll let you listen to it real quick just to get an idea of what we're working with. Right? Mixed, sounds fine. Big, punchy, in your face, loud, all those things you're looking for in a mix. The tip here, tip number 4, is not everything needs processing. Check this out. My clap, 0 plugins, 0 processing on my clap. My snare, 0 processing on the snare. 808 has 1 EQ that's just taking out 3.5 dBs and like the sub super low frequencies. That's it. Then all of that drum is on my drum bus, which just has 2 compressors. So it's just some compression. No EQ, no saturation, nothing. My tag has a lot of effects because it's my tag. That doesn't count. The vocal, little throw, just has a delay on it. And then the horn loop that I used has a high pass filter and a compressor. That's it. And then the halftime track is just the same processing as the original loop, but with halftime to, pitch it down and slow it as an effect. It's not even really a mixing thing. So that's all the mixing. And then there's just mix bus processing / mastering. That's it. And the mix sounds fine. Sometimes you don't need to do anything. Like in the instance of the clap and the snare, it didn't need anything. Especially when we're working with modern genres where these are processed samples, right? I'll let you hear the clap and the snare. Right, they're synthetic samples. It's not a live acoustic drum set. So these samples, most of the time, have already been processed to hell. So who am I to do more processing, right? It probably doesn't need it. In isolation, they sound fine. Sometimes you have to do some processing to get them work in your mix, to work with the other things you're, putting around it and arranging it with. Yeah, but the point here is sometimes you don't need to do something on every track. Sometimes it's fine the way it is, and all you're going to do is mangle it. We're here to make things better, not to just change it just for the sake of changing it, because then it's worse. So tip number 4 is sometimes you don't need to do anything, and a more kind of safe way to say it is careful not to over process. If it doesn't need anything, it doesn't need anything. You don't need to put soothe and parallel sidechain duck multiband compression on every track, right? These tricks are cool and they have their place, but you don't need to do it everywhere. And then tip number 5, in the same vein, is don't overlook the basics, particularly volume and panning. They're so simple and boring and we don't want to hear them, but there's a reason that they're so fundamental, is because they're a huge aspect on your mix. They're going to play a huge role in the outcome. Take, for example, this beat here. Notice how the hi-hats are mixed pretty loud. but that's intentional because it's such a sparse arrangement. There's not much going on. But even more importantly is that's where the bounce is coming from. All of the rhythm and bounce that makes you bob your head is coming from the hi-hat. Watch what happens if I mute it, how it feels like empty and you can't really dance to it. It feels stiff, and then you put the hi-hats in and so it's important to the rhythm and an important aspect of the song, so I made sure to mix it loud. Watch what happens if I pull the volume way down and mix it in like a way of a more traditional hi-hat, how we kind of lose the feel of the beat. Ready? As opposed to something more like this. So that right there is proof that the level you set something at, regardless of any extra processing you may or may not do, EQ, reverb, saturation, soothe, sidechain, multiband, right? Just getting the level right is going to have a huge impact on how we feel something. All the processing you're doing, it matters, but the volume you set it at and where you put it in the stereo field, the panning, is so much more important. Get a basic mix going first, and then all that other stuff is kind of the icing on the cake. So there you have it, guys. There's 5 tips for 2025 that's going to set you ahead of the competition or just get you in a place where you want to be, get your mixes sounding right. I'm here to give you the tips that people don't really want to talk about. They're not cute, they're not pretty, they're not clickbaity, but it's the reality, you know? Do you want to be tricked into some clickbait, or do you want the truth and actually improve on your mixes? That's what I'm here for. So if you could, leave me a comment, I'd appreciate it. Maybe like and subscribe. That would be dope. If not, no worries, man, because I'll get y'all tomorrow. Inswain with Inswain Audio. Peace.